All right. Today is August 19th, 2021, and it's in the liminal state. As of a couple days ago, Afghan government in Kabul, Afghanistan, and has failed. So there is now the outgoing government the outgoing military presence of the United States has been flash evaporated. I don't know how to put it. Kevin, you like what has happened in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, there's a long story and a short story. Short story is within 10 days, 12 days, the Taliban took over 60% of the country, including Kabul, when the CIA assessed that we'd have at least 90 days to hold Kabul. This came after Biden started withdrawing the 2,500 troops the U.S. had remaining on the ground. Long story is, this has been a long time coming, that the Taliban have been making gains for much of the last couple years. And in fact, even before the U.S. pullout last month, that Taliban gains were at their highest point since 2002, perhaps. So Taliban, quick, very fast, speedy advance throughout Afghanistan. Afghan national government, without U.S. help now, for the first time, essentially capitulated, withered away, nowhere to be seen at times. In fact, Kabul wasn't even fought for.
There were no major firefights.
Yeah, there's pretty much no firefights in Kabul. By the time the Taliban got to the outskirts, Afghan National Army either welcomed them in, or the soldiers tossed away their clothes, police officers tossed away their clothes, and blended into the population and escaped. And so what several things come to mind here. I mean, people are talking about a Saigon moment in 1975, top of a condo in Vietnam, grabbing a helicopter. It was a condominium. It was a residence. It wasn't the actual embassy. It was a residence near the embassy. Okay, condo's the wrong word, but
no. Yeah, I think you're probably right. A condo building.
Yeah, grabbing a helicopter on the roof of a residential building in Saigon. Those sort of images are conjured up, and the fact that this happened a mere 12 days or 2 weeks after Biden essentially withdrew the small amount of contingent troops we had left, about 2,500 in total, withdrew them from combat roles, makes it even more glaring an issue, and even more glaring a potential legacy left for Biden early in his first term.
Legacy left. What do you mean by legacy? What the legacy he's leaving behind?
It's difficult to speculate about.
That's what we're talking about.
You're right.
I mean,
there's a human cost to all this. There's the strategic military failure I'd love to talk about, but
a little bit. What I mean is, in the liminal state, we want to talk about the where it could go, almost, because we're in a point right now at this moment where it's not cemented. Like, there's talk on how we're not going to see, but the decision has been made. One of the things that is happening, we just watch, for example, is video that is coming out from Afghanistan of the people having to deal with this. There's people falling off planes as they're taking off. There's shooting at gatherings. There's people mobbing the airport, and personal anecdotes of what is going on in there. What is going to be the legacy? How is not cemented yet.
You're right, and there's several liminal states here. There is a sort of a longer-term American policy liminal state of, does this mean we're moving to a new type of comfort or lack thereof with foreign interventions. Does this mean we are moving to a place where we start to realize the limits of our American military might, even though people were saying this in the 70s too, and that didn't stop us in the decades afterwards? But the more liminal state, the biggest liminal state question at hand is, what is the future of Afghanistan? Using this Kabul Airport fiasco as a microcosm of Afghanistan, where can we be moving to? You see the airport itself covered by 4,000 American troops, and reasonably secure once you're on the airport grounds, and once you step outside those gates, Taliban checkpoints, Taliban beating people trying to get in.
Yeah.
You have this sort of very interesting phase change between you are in this new Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan, but once you take a few steps into the airport, you still have some degree of hope for a Western life, for a better life. So this is the most prominent liminal state at play, I would say.
Of that, yeah. Well, I think that it's a culmination of 20 years of being there, right? Like, what is the chaos that we are experiencing? I think, well, we see it as chaos. I think a lot of people read chaos because they're watching that. But from all other, not all other, but otherwise, it's going like there isn't that much bloodshed outside. Like the government, there's no fighting, there's no major warfare. There's people who really want to get the fuck out of here because they do not want to live under Sharia law and in a lot of that, but and there are instances where women have been attacked, and like the coming about the Taliban has not been good for certain people, but when there's a regime change, shit's gonna happen. Like people take the instances to do things. But overall, we have this idea of chaos, and it's because it's bewildering, I think, from what happened. But I think more than anything, this is the liminal point where we should understand that it was all an illusion. This chaos that we found in the airport was happening elsewhere, and it got swept in and concentrated in there. But Afghanistan was never going well. It wasn't like you mentioned that they had come back. They were 80% of the country, meaning that a year prior it was 50 and 30, but at a point it was less than 30. It was 20, 10. They came back.
Right. So this sort of begs the question: how much chaos, how much new chaos is there really in Afghanistan, given the country's recent history? I mean, how much of what we're experiencing right now is stemming from a people scared of a new invading force?
No, I think
versus the actual. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is we are genuine. Afghanistan, in some sense, is genuinely less chaotic now because there's no more war. There is one occupying force for 95% of the country. There's no more need for.
I think that's what we mean is when we do keep coming up with the idea of chaos and like that, but that's a chaos that's here in the United States in our minds.
But that's not the chaos we're reacting to. The chaos we as Americans here in the West are reacting to is the chaos at the airport, the chaos in Kabul. It's the chaos of the images and videos from social media.
Okay, exactly. And let's focus on that. First of all, number one, it's social media. Therefore, it is being curated by someone who has access to a phone. Like I know I'm being very broad, like in the amount of people who have phones and are like that, but wants to communicate this and are putting that forward, right? So again, I think that chaos that we see in Kabul is a chaos that is inside our own heads, yes, those people are in a very distressed situation. I don't want to dispel the personal chaos that they're going through. But on the long march of history, there are certain things that the Taliban is saying now that make us believe that there's at least a ray of hope that people won't be persecuted and it won't be a bloodbath, and
they've moderated. It's our favorite Islamic fundamentalist moderating, right, Enrique?
Well, I mean, in honesty, that's the only.
There goes the Taliban again.
That's the only thing that might come out of this, is that the Taliban found out that one certain part of their country got the taste of their girls going to school, and because and it was also 20 years. That's enough year for a 15-year-old girl to have gone to school, something like that, and their parents coming back finding out that the girls taking care of them are less of assholes than their sons taking care of them.
Or they make more money now, and they have a better retirement.
And because that's something that's happened here in the Western world, but it was again a survival strategy that ancient peoples had for glom on to suck up to the one that's going to be stronger later.
Sure.
Right. That's basically a parent's job on the latter half of it. But in this situation, they got moderated, but the chaos, I think, is the felt chaos outside again of being dispossessed from your house and fearing for your life. Granted, is here in the United States. I think is how utterly we failed. 20 years, people have any concept of it. How utterly we failed. Luckily for the government, there's not that many people aware of how utterly we failed, right? For example, the fact that I know, when Trump killed that the Iranian dude that was in Iraq.
Qasem Soleimani.
Yeah. Everyone was like, "Oh, great, we killed that dude."
Right.
It was an admission of total failure in the part of the U.S. military and government, because Soleimani was in Iraq with no care to hide or in any
openly way. It was a pretty brazen caravan he was in.
The only way that we were able to get him was through drone strikes, which really are, the hand of God. Because you can get to one, you can't even see some of them before a Hellfire missile strikes you. That's not like, oh, that was great, we were able to do that. That's like, we had to use this one weapon that lets us, that's at the highest end, because he also made himself complete. Because that's
not how it was framed, though. It was framed as a resounding military strategic success.
But again, I think if we are to get past this liminal state, is to see all these illusions, right? Nobody's going back and saying who argued for us to stay here in Afghanistan and keep doing this. Who was it?
I mean, I think there's a minority, but a strong minority that thinks we should be there until the job is done.
What was the job?
Well, if you listen to Biden's speech, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, he made it seem like the reason we went in the first place was to essentially incapacitate Al-Qaeda, and we did that. So he almost made it seem like we've accomplished our mission. Now, you ask most people, I don't think they'd come away with that same conclusion.
No. So, again, the thing is, you want to get the job done. But when you got a contractor in your house built that you hired to build to remodel your kitchen, and he's flooded the house, right? He's flooded the house. He took out a bearing wall, and now they have to fix that. And now you're paying.
He's got to stay. He's got to stay. Right?
He's got to stay till he finishes the job. I mean, once the house is on fire and it's reduced to ash, I guess we're going to have to hire him to come back and build a house
build a new house.
Build a new house if he can. That's whoever says we stay here till the job is done is literally saying that, because demonstratively after 20 years, after today, demonstratively, with not a shadow of a doubt, the U.S. military and whatever complex was created to do nation building has utterly failed.
And that is just it. So there is a liminal state within the way interventions are sold. If you remember back to 2003, the Iraq War was sold to counter the supposed weapons of mass destruction, the Niger uranium link. The 2001 Afghan invasion was sold to get rid of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban elements that harbor Al-Qaeda. You ask the average American, last year why we were in those countries, many would say we're in those countries because of democracy. Or in those countries,
women's
rights, or to help build a nation. Many would say protect us from terrorism, which was actually never a threat in Iraq, and which, in many ways, in a very narrow sense, is no longer a threat from Afghanistan. But
we created more terrorists with the war than anything else.
We did, yeah. So in these assessments of American military prowess, when they cite how many terrorists we've killed or incapacitated, you also have to think about, okay, that's one side of the ledger. Terrorists, you drone striked. I get that. That's an actual metric, important metric. How about terrorists created? So how many people, when you bomb a village, you might get that. You might get that Soleimani. You might get that Mullah Baradar wannabe Taliban leader. How many civilians do you kill too? And how many of those kids and daughters grow up hating America? So I think there's two sides of a ledger. We're really poor at assessing that. But going back to liminal state, there is a murky uncertainty about why we're in the places we're in. Now, that being said, I'm not a fan of us staying in Afghanistan 20 years. I'm hugely angry at the way Biden pulled out. So there is a strategic liminal state question. There's also an execution implementation question.
Well, again, but the Biden administration would have done what? They would have said, hey, Pentagon, we want to be out by this date, have everyone out by this date, right? Secretary of State, so maybe that's where it comes. The Secretary of State. What is the... Look, the crux of the point was, at no point did the U.S. say, okay, Taliban, we recognize you as a sovereign force that we have no control over and that governs territory, and we're going to deal with you accordingly.
We kind of did,
again, kind of.
In the sense of...
To a certain degree, to satisfy the optics of what the U.S. is willing or not to do.
I actually do think that we had a detente with the Taliban. Taliban, in fact, since Trump signed his agreement with them a year and a half ago, they never attacked us again. We've been negotiating with the Taliban from their official office in Qatar.
Again, this is Trump, who, by definition and by act, has defied all previous things. We had 8 years of Obama, all right?
Sure.
Who received a peace prize for less fact than being black.
But
right?
That was a pretty ridiculous Nobel Peace Prize. But I would argue strongly that Trump wasn't this amazing break. Obama negotiated with Taliban too. Trump just upped it. Trump just called out the inconsistencies in our foreign policy narrative.
Yeah, but again, 8 years of not really dealing, because again, the way, how did we get out of Japan? Because that is very much more of a of a thing for like where we
Killed
went in,
100,000, injured 500,000.
utterly destroyed a
Yeah.
nation because they have fucked with us,
Right.
right? And occupied it and left. How was that handled? It was handled as one sovereign country saying, "Okay, do these things," and then the drawdown was gradual. Was not even gradual. Still have, things there. So I guess a never-ending.
Yeah,
occupation.
15,000 troops there. I'm not sure I enjoy that comparison because Japan, as a very industrialized, developed country, we don't have to deal with the same threats as happen in poor rural countries. Poor rural countries have a much higher rate of certain ideologies taking hold, especially certain anti-imperialist ideologies.
But you just said it, like an organized industrial count. Who do we have to fear more from, really? Right? Like, it's like these rural folks, really fucking dangerous.
Right. I mean, we're okay. So, but right now the discussion isn't about we fucked up in Taliban. We should be scared of what's going to happen to us. It's more about we fucked up in Afghanistan. We should be scared of what's happening to the Afghan people, especially those who worked with us.
Again, yes. So this is going to be part. There's going to be like, guess the controversial part of it of me saying something, but the U.S. military is now known for its honor. It's known for its allegiance. One soldier will be very much aligned and in with his patrol, with his squad, with his platoon, maybe with the country, but not honor, not even amongst itself. What happened in after World War One, when MacArthur went and cleaned up the veterans that were camped out in front of the Capitol, asking for the things.
Right.
These are veterans. They just finished the war. They're asking for help. The general comes in with their troops and clears out their families and everything. That's one. We could go on. We could go on with how they behaved during the Indian Wars, like the total genocide that was happening, right. Or we can go to anywhere else. Again, the translators and all that. After this, I doubt anyone will ever work like in a way. Like,
you'd be an idiot to work with the Americans in a dangerous country.
Now, you always would have been a fucking idiot to work with the Americans. Because, again, we have allegiance. We have a sense of people being very close to each other and having a lot of, again, allegiance to someone else.
Right.
But there's no honor. Because allegiance will always take over.
And this is interesting because I think most Americans would see that flipped. We talk about the military. Its stories are rife with honor, with what you do you do anything you can to save a wounded soldier.
They're not filled with honor. They're filled with sacrifice. They're filled with valor.
The whole honor your troops sort of thing is we
again. I go back to this. That is not where honor lives. Now, have you ever heard the highest the medal you can get is the Medal of Honor?
Sure.
Like, have you heard some of the stuff that people do to get the Medal of Honor? It's not always honorable. It is fucking amazing. It's like, like they will the people that do these things are the type of people who say, they're, I was inside of a plane going down and everything was on fire, as calmly as telling you, the box scores for a baseball game.
Sure.
Or just relaying simple information. But the Medal of Honor is, again, given for fighting for your group. Fighting. The guy who stopped the Mei Ling massacre did not get a Medal of Honor.
Really?
He might have gotten some
because
sort
nobody
of
recommended
commendation.
him, right?
Nobody. He showed honor. Nobody recommended him for anything else other than that. Medal of Honor is given for people who 100% do inhuman thing. Well, not inhuman things, but things that are heroic, that are valorous, that show great love for their fellow soldiers and their friends, and their ability to inflict damage on the enemy. Honor? No. Again, the guy who stopped like the for people from tossing hand grenades into villages, he didn't get a Medal of Honor.
Sure.
He did not. That doesn't come out, right? Like, nobody got a Medal of Honor for exposing what was going on in Abu Ghraib. No one thought of getting a Medal of Honor for exposing what was going on in Abu Ghraib.
Right.
There wasn't going to be any benefit from it. Again, we go back to just how they treat their own soldiers.
But you would say that the loyalty, though, right, or service. What was the other adjective you used?
Allegiance.
Allegiance. Well, allegiance is easier. Allegiance doesn't require any particular skill. Allegiance is simply, I feel this way towards a symbol, towards a nation. It's harder to disprove allegiance.
Yeah. But let's go back to these things. Again, now, the problem comes not with allegiance, but with honor, and with these Afghan interpreters and Afghan nationals that helped and supported the U.S. that are left behind. They showed allegiance. We're not showing allegiance back, because showing allegiance back and recognizing someone. Okay, so if you talk to a soldier, they are agonizing over this. People who have worked there have friends who are Afghani who were left behind, are agonizing over this. I think in a couple of months we're going to have a lot of people just doing stupid things. Stupid things like turning your car on inside your garage. That kind of stupid thing because of this. Because this is attacking their moral, their very soul as to how we're behaving towards it. However, the generals, the bureaucrats in Congress,
they'll get off scotch-free.
There is no honor there. There is no honor in the military.
Well, I mean, I don't think, from what I've heard, most military leaders did not support Biden's decision, nor did they support Trump's decision to reduce our troop levels.
Again,
they've been overruled.
Okay, so the military leaders, the Pentagon, again. So if we go right now to allegiance, which I think is the new name for Blackwater.
Is it really? Is it called allegiance? That would be way too fucking blatant.
Blackwater's new name.
Zay?
Oh,
the
Blackwater
fuck?
now is Zay.
Za.
Za. XE. Blackwater becomes Za.
Oh my god.
All right. Anyway, it wasn't allegiance. It was something else. If we look in there, how many 4-star generals are part of that
board of
either
directors
CEO or board of directors?
Yeah, probably a few at least.
Yeah. You can't trust these motherfuckers. These generals that we want to stay there longer. Why? Why
I
do you
don't know
want
if
to
you
stay
can
longer?
trust them though, because I think cognitive dissonance is a very human trait. So they could have served very honorably throughout their careers militarily. They retire and they realize, oh shit, I can actually make money off this. You can do both.
Okay. So I'm gonna do this. Let's just spitball the psychological profile of a 4-star general. Doesn't have to be that they made it to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They're pretty high.
Pretty high up.
Is this someone who plans maybe 20 years in advance?
To get to that level takes ambition and planning, without a doubt.
Okay. So, are they planning post retirement?
I don't think they have to. I think given when they retire, they typically retire at retirement age, or near there. They typically retire at a decent salary. I don't think they're that worried about money. Now, they're not rich as fuck, but they're well
Kevin,
off.
let me ask you this. If at 65 you were to have the option between 70% of your salary, let's say that works out to a nice, comfortable $70,000.
If you're a 4-star general, it's probably more like $300,000 at least, if not more.
Okay. Okay, 4-star general. Okay. Service distinction. There's a lot of stuff going on. If you join a board and now are making $1 million a year, is that better?
100%. I mean, no one's going to argue it's not better. I'm just going to point to the studies that you and I both know. Marginal utility of money drops once you make about $75K a year. So, are they thinking about money when they're retiring?
Okay. Marginal utility of money. Okay. Again, you and I know that. However, there's not Gucci handbags and phones for when people think that way.
Something tells me
those things don't exist in a world where that is a widespread
Something tells me General McChrystal doesn't give a fuck about Gucci handbags.
No, but he does give a fuck about a 60-foot yacht. He does give a fuck about
he wants his cocaine and prostitutes. Yeah,
he wants to leave a legacy. He has family.
Sure.
Again, it's like from the profile. Is this someone who is going to know what they want to do and know the importance of laying early groundwork on a strategy? Like they've literally been taught this.
Right.
Like saying that I'm not inferring always, but even at a small percentage of like a 10% or even 5%, that still is a very that's significant in this realm, because we're again there's a multiplier to these people's intentions and actions because they are by design surreptitious. By design, they are focusing on something, and their behavior at the far end of that bell curve. Okay, I'm going to grant you it's like one.
Yeah.
But the corrupting nature of that, of the general thing being like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's not so bad. That's not I'll think about that. Like, the more they recruit people into that, the easier it is for them to profit too.
Sure.
Right? So
it's like a pyramid scheme almost.
In a way, but again, that's what I'm saying is like that these generals, these admirals, colonels, any all of them telling you that to stop a war is like, again, a contract or a carpenter or a contractor, you're hiring someone out to do something. Like, tell me when you're done. All right, you're gonna pay me as long as I keep doing this shit, no matter how badly I do it. Okay, right? You can they're not the people we should even listen to.
I agree that there is a certain type of desire when you're that high up in the military. You think about your legacy a lot. You are probably inculcated into this idea that problems can be solved through military means, although every time you hear about interviews with rank and file soldiers, they cut against that idea, and I think many top military commanders are kind of they're products of the Cold War, right? By their age, they grew up in the Cold War, and they still believe in this idea of American might. American might beat the Soviets, right?
Well, again, I think maybe you just caught on to something because it is an optics thing. Why did we go to the moon? Because the Russians went to space.
Sure.
Like it was very much an optics and this, this emotional reaction to things,
Right.
that governs the American psyche. Because at our root, we are English, right? Like that's who came over. Most of the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence were English citizens prior to that, of Scottish and Irish heritage.
Sure.
That's a horrible place to start, right? Like, these are awful people. Okay, I'm not gonna go.
They're just the shittiest of the shitty, really. The Scotch Irish. Let's be honest.
All right, so you got the English.
They work magic with a fiddle. They make some great fucking moonshine, but just the worst fucking people.
I was gonna trend on Twitter. Kevin.
I hope we didn't offend our Scotch Irish fans. We actually love you, but really, just really shitty people.
We have fans right now. All right. We're gonna have to edit that because that's a little bit on the nose. I did start it. Okay. Anyway, but this optics, the optics of going to the moon, the optics of how we appear to people. One of the reasons that only Nixon could go to China or could open that door, right? To be serious, had to do with optics. The reason
I would argue it had more to do with strategic reasons for pulling them away from Moscow, but go on.
No, again, yeah, but who could have politically survived doing that had to be Nixon.
He was a popular president at that point.
He was a popular president. He was also a conservative.
Sure.
Who could, like, had it been a Democrat, had it been the other side, they would have had a harder time.
I mean, Trump and Kim Jong-un, yeah. The fact that he was Trump, he got away with that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's again, these politics, these optics things govern, and for it to be governed so much by it, I think hopefully is what we're able to be able to know that there's an illusion going on, and that we cannot, what was the illusion that was happening with Afghanistan is that we, at least that's people, I have to believe, because we were still there, had a belief that we were somehow either making the world safer for us or the world, or actually helping people to attain a better life. Now, I have a lot of trouble being able to understand how anybody could believe that. Like, just it doesn't compute. Like,
you don't think there's a simple argument to Taliban not only allowed some terrorist elements in, but they took away human rights, and by us taking the Taliban away, we were making Afghans' lives better. That to me is a very simple and semi-believable argument, wouldn't you say?
In a way, in 1996, when the Taliban rolled in to everything, they were also blowing up, statues.
Oh yeah, Bamyan, one of the worst crimes against cultural
world.
Humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incensing people. They were, again, in Iraq, destroying ancient sites that weren't Muslim or anything like that. So when they started off, let's clarify. What am I responding to?
We're talking about. Well, you said, how can they fall for this Afghan war? And I said, it's actually there are actually some simple arguments that make it seem like we could help by pulling away.
So number one, so they came in. There was a bad PR for these people because they were, dicks. They're dicks. But
They're students. They're Talibs. They're students.
Exactly.
Right?
Now we went in after when it was said that it was Al Qaeda and it was Bin Laden. The Taliban said, "Oh fuck, we didn't know he did it. Here he is. We got him." Literally, right? We got him. We're gonna turn him over. We don't want to deal with your shit. Like if he
Is that true?
Yes, 100%.
I was under the impression that they acknowledged that they weren't aware of Al Qaeda's activities. I didn't know that they actually offered to give Bin Laden to the Americans.
Yeah, they were
Okay.
they were like, we could have at least asked, "Hey, can you get him for us?" Like
Yeah.
you're right there.
Yeah, I'm not sure we even asked though.
But that's the thing is,
Right.
we didn't even ask. We didn't take that seriously. We did go in and destroy the Al Qaeda bases, got in information, and then there was no reason to stay other than they had destroyed cultural sites. They got really bad PR for being 17th century. All that bad PR that they get.
Well, the reason to stay was they were fighting us, so we had to fight them, Enrique.
Exactly. So then it became we have to, it was depending on who you were, right? We're staying there to make it safe so that Al Qaeda can't come back and do another 9/11. Fine, you live in Kansas, but fuck, remember 9/11. Then other people, hey, look at these cute Afghan girls. Now they're going to school. So you got all that, but neither one of those were being really achieved, right? Because again, we just discussed how most of what we did, drone strikes and all, created way many more terrorists.
I'm not sure
converts.
they created. It's possible. I think those two things you gave, one, the launching of attacks from Afghanistan, and two, the lack of girls' education. On those two things, I think we succeeded pretty well. Now, in a very narrow sense. So, Al Qaeda has only a negligible presence in Afghanistan today, and probably has for the last 5, 8, 10 years. Now, broader picture, ISIS is now as big in Afghanistan. So we've substituted one terrorist group for another. Okay, but women's education. Girls can go to school. Broader picture, girls can go to school in parts of Afghanistan that were governed by the national government. But the reality was there's still a lot of conservatives in Afghanistan who didn't want their kids going to school. They didn't want their women going to school. So we were also butting against very conservative cultures, especially in Pashtun areas.
Exactly. And again, when you go in to say my culture is better, which is what we get from the West, and most people, it's their natural thing, but the West, again, England, and they're spreading and all that, the Dutch, all those, again, our civilization is, our way of doing things is superior, therefore we're going to inculcate that into you, right? The Christianity, all that stuff. So that is way part of what we tried to do in Afghanistan, to prove that our way was the right way to do things. Like, that's ultimately, that was, we couldn't leave because we had just done our job. We had to, that's the thing. The thing is that it was a sales job, right? If you're a salesman, you find out, what is it that you really care about? And then I tell you about that.
That's your in, yeah.
And the generals who in 10 years were going to work for a contractor kept us there. It wasn't just the generals, it was everyone that was profiteering from what a war gives you. Like, money just flows out in a war. It's chaos, so things get lost. There's just a way for money to be laundered.
So I agree with you, but how much of it is and I keep making these arguments, and part of me is like, Kevin, you're making really fucking simplistic arguments, but how much of it do you genuinely think is we still thought there was a terrorist threat from Afghanistan? It might have been a misguided thought. Because Al Qaeda was there for bits.
But are we really forgiving that level of naivety?
Well,
like that level of incompetence in our intelligence.
In 2005, apparatus. That wasn't naivety. In 2015, that might be naivety.
But again, like our intelligence services are just from this. Just the fact that it was an instant collapse versus a possible just like hang on, at least that came from somewhere, right? Like they talked to people, they walked around, they gauged, they took air and so I go back to this being sort of in a way the tragic failure of current Western society and humanity. That desire to please your boss because they have so much control over your life and what to do. Oh yeah, it's gonna be whatever you did, it's gonna hold 30. It's gonna hold 3 months. Someone said. Now, I can imagine them being like, oh, the fucking God. That's true. I hope to fucking God that's true. They know it's not, but they really hope so. And there's just an outside chance that will, or they convince themselves that will be the case.
Cognitive dissonance, yeah.
Cognitive dissonance, just like not accepting the reality that we are actually in front of. We are, in a way, fake news, all that stuff. Like, what is more fake news? Now, as of today, maybe this is the liminal state. This is where we're going. What is more fake news as of today than any news or anyone saying that we were doing really well with creating a stable Afghan government? That what we had created there was something that could withstand and govern the people there. In 20 years, that was like something that could stand any length of time. Like all that is fake news now. Now it is known that it was lies.
And obviously, hindsight's always 20/20. But even as far back as 4, 5, 6 years ago, we were seeing Inspector General reports from the Department of Defense talking about the level of corruption in the Afghan National Army and the type of misspending and total waste and ghost soldiers that were, a huge waste of the public dime. Last year, we had one of the biggest journalistic scoops ever come out, I would say, the Afghan papers essentially, talking about how for well over a decade, our military leaders, our government was lying to us about the course of the war in Afghanistan, about how much progress we were making, how much we're building capacity in the Afghan National Army, how much civil society was thriving, the Taliban were on their heels, when in private, they said quite the opposite. So I'm with you. That's maybe one of the early forms of fake news, where it's double speak. It's government bureaucrats admit the truth internally, but to the media, to the public, they put on the happy face. Now, my question is, though, at what point does the risk of fighting a dastardly force and occupying a country with a dastardly force the media hates become the biggest thing holding you back from withdrawing? Because I mean, I'm sure Bush thought about this, as did Obama and Trump. It would look really bad if you withdraw and the Taliban take over.
Well, yes.
As we now know.
Again, optics. We go back to optics. One of the reasons that Obama couldn't get anything done in Afghanistan, simply, and he had the situation, split Afghanistan into different countries. It's not one country now. It's the Pashtuns have their place.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. They can't. Someone, somewhere, that nugget was planted in Obama's head into all their things that they could not get out of this with having that was somehow a failure. We have to come out of this with Afghanistan,
with a unified Afghanistan, exactly.
Because it has to look like this.
So these random maps that were drawn by General Durand and other British bureaucrats, these are the end all be all. We cannot mess with them.
Exactly. It is a little bit of delivery. Like the salesman said something, and now we have to deliver exactly what the salesman is. We're just freaking out about it.
But the crazy thing is that, much like America, we have this insane allegiance to our Declaration of Independence, to our Bill of Rights, this symbolism of America, our flag. But we are one of the most federalist countries in the Western world. So we delegate. We are a very decentralized country in spite of our deep love of the flag and all things American. Yet we went to Afghanistan, which was a very, very, I know this word tribal is misused and hated by some, but it was a very tribal country. And we tried to enforce the centralized bureaucracy from Kabul.
That we don't even use.
We don't even use ourselves. And that in this land where, I've here in Denver, I've worked with the Afghan community on several occasions. For example, a big Nowruz event, Persian Afghan New Year event we put on a few years ago. And there were deep divisions between, especially between Pashtun and Hazara Afghans, but also with Tajik Afghans too. These are very politically incorrect to talk about. You talk about them with the left and how dare you insinuate, how dare you play into this whole ethnic archetype. But these are very real divisions. And in some ways, the Taliban played on them. Taliban are a very Pashtun organization. They totally persecuted the Hazara. Tajiks didn't have a whole lot of say in the organization. But the reality is, a tribal country with very, very visceral ethnic divisions, yet we govern it like it's fucking Moscow. It's Moscow in 1955.
There is a disconnect in how something should be governed and how we think it should be governed, and it keeps happening that we go in thinking, having absolutely no idea what we're doing or why we're doing it. But again, that confusion comes in. It is not an accident. It is definitely, instigated by people who want to profit from that chaos, from that grind, from that situation being chaotic, and that's when you move the queen to another cup. That's when you pick the pocket. That's when you do the crime during chaos, when you can't be traced. Again, this was just big money laundering. How much was the equipment that the U.S. bought? How much did they buy it for? Is that what the contractor bought it for wholesale? We don't know. It was just a wholesale money being handed over to the private contractors and people who invested in these private contractors. So anyway, I think we're coming up on the end of where we should be, and at the end of this, I see that we are, what I hope will come through as we pass this through this looking glass, is that looking glass is shattered, and we are, more people are woke, as in.
Are we woke? Really? We're woke.
For real woke.
Okay.
Woke of.
Not Twitter woke, but.
Yeah, woke to the illusion of competence, the illusion of honor that we we drape over things in order to get away with graft and to get away with atrocities, and what we do, we use this flag to drape things over. Like, that's what I hope. Like, just anybody that had anything to do with the Afghan campaign of having any credibility now, like, how can you? Like, can anybody have credibility after what we saw they invested 20 years into?
In terms of strategists, now, I do think there is political culpability, not simply military culpability. The generals can only do so much. The generals are doing all they can. I have no doubt that our top commanders, from Petraeus to McChrystal and others, they realize that they're long term, there's no pure military solution. They realize that. They needed us to step to the court when it came to a power sharing agreement. Honestly, and a lot of people hate to hear about this, Afghans and Americans alike, but there needs to be a way that the embattled Pashtun minority that has some degree of conservative religious orientation and wants some degree of Islamic government is accommodated, because you kill it. I'm good. There's no other way. That was wine, by example. We're getting to the end of this podcast, and we need some liquid fuel to keep going.
But you were saying,
so the onus, I think, was on the political leaders to push forward some sort of negotiated settlement. And to be fair, they tried. So Obama started off the contacts with the Taliban. Not only, I'm sure Bush was talking to the Taliban. Everyone talks to everyone, but Obama got the green light. It gave the green light to Qatar to host essentially an embassy for the Taliban in Doha, which they've had for 10, 12 years. And we've had negotiations going on and off for probably upwards of a decade. Now the problem is when you announce a surge that's time limited, and when you announce a pullout that is supposed to end at a certain point in time, that really removes the leverage you have at the negotiating table. So when Obama says, I'm going to we have 30,000 troops in Afghanistan, I'm going to up that to 100,000, but they're going to leave in 18 months. If you're a smart Taliban commander, you're like, okay, I'm just going to lay low for 18 months, and American troops will leave. Similarly, if you're Trump and you're saying, Taliban, bad, but our troops are going to get out by May of 2021. If you're a smart Taliban, you won't fuck with the Americans. You'll bide your time, and when they pull out, you'll come back en masse in force. And so I think we suffered from the military strategy not meshing with the political strategy. If we had a unified consensus without timelines, and we really pushed for a power sharing agreement, we could have got a government that it wouldn't have looked like what we wanted, but it would have looked a lot better than the government we have now in Afghanistan.
But in this liminal state, in this today, the 19th of August, and going on to the 20th and the 30th, and when we're going to be making, as a people, choices, and we're going to be influencing those politicians, what are the things that you see through the looking glass? What do you see, like, coming up, or what is crystallizing? What's coming up?
Well, I would say short term in Afghanistan, there's clearly no more Western appetite for military intervention. There is a small band of essentially rebels against Taliban in the Panjshir province, but by and large, Taliban has the country and it will have the country, and we have to accept that. Now, CIA might and probably will fund some element of anti-Taliban opposition, but Taliban country. So we better hope to God Taliban is moderated to some extent. Best case scenario, absolute best case scenario, Afghanistan ends up in 20 years like Iran is looking now, which is to say, still autocratic, still theocratic, still lacking human rights, but allowing for enough human rights enough freedom.
There's more gender equality in
Yeah,
Iran.
yeah, enough gender equality, enough capitalism for there to be a thriving society, even though it's an Islamic country. Best case scenario. And we as Americans, we have to get used to that. That like we cannot make Iraq, Afghanistan, anywhere else into a fucking Canada, America. No, it's going to be different. Longer term, I hope this causes us to do what we weren't able to do post Vietnam, which was truly have a humility about what we can do militarily.
All right, well, we're just going to leave it off.